So hi, this is the Validator panel. I'll quickly introduce myself and then have everyone introduce themselves and we can get started. So I'm Daniel. I'm a protocol specialist at Stakefish, and I also lead special projects at F2Pool.
I'm Tim Ogilvie. I'm the founder and CEO of Staked. We're the largest partner to institutions who want to run validators on proof-of-stake networks.
I'm Evan. I co-founded Mina Protocol, and now I am CEO of the Mina Foundation.
Mohan, if you want to. Mohak, sorry.
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm Mohak. I'm the founder of ClayStack, and we're building a liquid staking protocol.
Awesome. So maybe we can, after our introduction, you can dive a bit deeper into maybe some of the special things that you guys have been doing each. We have a validator, we have a protocol, and then we also have kind of like a layer, an application layer staking solution. So yeah, if you want to get started with Staked.
Sure. So Staked is a partner to institutions who want to hold crypto and earn a yield on that crypto. So today, that largely means we run infrastructure on about 40 different proof-of-stake networks, all of the big ones. And we also provide, in some cases, packaged solutions that allow investors to invest in that in the way that they want. So a lot of crypto-native funds will hold crypto directly and delegate to our validators. We also offer a trust product, which is effectively shares of stock, where we go off and we buy the asset, we custody the asset, and we stake that asset. So investors get the combo of yield and the exposure of the crypto asset. So that's generally what we do.
Yeah, Mina is a layer 1 proof-of-stake protocol. So one of the properties of Mina is it uses a zero-knowledge proof to make verifying the chain very, very easy. So it's actually particularly easy to run a validator if you're a hobbyist or a smaller entity that just wants to run a node without the difficulty that might come up otherwise.
Yeah, so I've been running validator nodes for the last 3 years, and the biggest challenge that I saw with people participating in staking was the lockups. A lot of people just want freedom. And they did not want to kind of lock up their assets for, let's say, 7 to 11% yield in a year. And to solve that, I started ClayStack, which is a liquid staking protocol by which people can earn staking rewards without any lockups and participate in DeFi ecosystem at the same time.
Awesome. So I think we've had a few questions that people have submitted, and it's basically decentralization, and I think maybe we can go around and talk about it, especially at the layer 1 level, at the validator level, like you and I are at, and then we have liquid staking. So at least with Ethereum 2, with the beacon chain, Staked and Stakefish are one of the largest validator service providers that do have ETH2 staked. How do you kind of see that panning out in terms of the type of decentralization we have? And I just want to follow that up with the type of decentralization transparency that I think a lot of people maybe take for granted. I remember we had a bunch of people kind of crying foul with the way ETH2 decided to term what a validator was in terms of their 32 ETH increments versus the larger pooled type of validators. But yeah, I mean, if you want to give your comments or opinions on sure. how that has been aggregating and what we see after the merge with the beacon chain in the future.
So one of Stake's competitors, Lorian from Figment, was on just before us. And one of the things he said is, if you fast forward a couple years and all we've done is re-centralize things on a few entities, we've failed at this. And so we're acutely conscious of you can't have that as the end result. But in large part, my job is just to service our clients and our customers who care more about having typically a throat to choke than to spread their stake with a bunch of validators who they might not know. So Staked tends to run all our infrastructure on We run across 5 different cloud providers, and we run in different data centers all across the world on those cloud providers. So we, in effect, decentralize ourselves. When we can, we use different client software. And then I think clients vote with their feet. When we got very large on Ethereum, we saw people who actually went with competitors just because we were getting a little too big. And I was sad, but I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk more about some of the nuances of how people are kind of measuring decentralization. But for example, when we have, let's say, right, back in 2014 on the POW side, right, Ghash was one of the largest mining pools, and they had to temporarily basically tell everyone, all the miners that were sending their hash rate to these mining pools to Ghash, stop sending us your hash rate because we're over 51% on the Bitcoin network. How do we, do you, like, for example, right, no, even if, let's say, staking service providers like ourselves, like Stakefish or even Staked, we go over like an alarming amount of stake that has been staked with us on a particular layer 1 network, and we just shut down our front end, right? So people can't literally click a button and stake, but it still doesn't prevent people from still sending their stake because they either trust us, right? Like Staked is a very reputable staking service provider versus maybe some lesser known staking service providers. Like, do you think that has, there's more problems that we need to solve? Because shutting down front ends is great, but if people is very motivated to stake with us and continue to centralize, like we don't really have a solution around that yet, right? Yeah, I'd be interested, anyone. But.
I think what's really interesting to me about this is how much the technical choices a protocol makes ends up affecting these outcomes. I think in particular with Mina, one thing that's nice about it is that it is very easy to run a node. So theoretically, more people will run their own node instead of, delegating it out. That said, I think that only kind of goes partway towards really solving the problem in the long run. And I think there's kind of more complicated levers you have to start thinking about pulling if you want to really think about decentralizing stake. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that goes, we can bring it to Mohak because, right, liquid staking, we have like these issues of, right, let's say a validator behaves maliciously or is like suddenly taking up all the stake, then, and there's like lockup periods, right, whatever, like 21 days before where you can actually move, or some networks actually let you move your delegation to different validators. But like with the introduction of liquid staking, you have immediate liquidity where you want to move your stake. But that still brings in a lot of problems with certain jurisdictions having regulatory issues with that, as well as, let's say, insurance, right? And what might happen there. But yeah, I'd be interested in your take on that, Mohak.
Yeah, so one thing around like slashing, as you know, I mean, this has been discussed so much theoretically, but as professional validators, you know how low probability of that it is. But you're right, as a protocol, we do cover kind of that slashing risk by building a insurance pool to cover all of that. Now, coming to your first kind of comment about the changes that we will see after the merge. So right now, there's a lot more interest towards a few validators that people want to stake because there is no unstaking enabled. So people are taking very calculated decision that they know that once they are staking to stake.fish or stake.us, that stake will last for 6 to 12 months. So if the validator is not performing well, they'll kind of get slashed. But after the merge, there's a radical shift that will happen where people might not take that level of calculated decisions, rather kind of right now, for example, if someone is charging 10% commission versus someone is charging 2% commission, you'll still favor the guy who has more reputation or the validator who has more reputation. But later on, these other macro factors will also kind of starts to affect.
That actually brings up an interesting question in terms of like how people are choosing different validators based on commission. So, right, when you look at the type of validators you want to choose when you go to like on a chain, for example, right? The only metrics that you have are right commission, uptime, et cetera, and to the extent of like decentralization, people have like this I feel like it's not necessarily more what we had expected in terms of like the market efficiency or like the stake redelegation efficiency. People will stake with a top staking service provider on that list, even though it's like, right, they charge 10% commission, and then someone will charge 7% commission or change it, and then people won't redelegate. There's this wonderful article by Chris Remus from Chainflow, who is called "The Rise of the Activist Validator," where he actually went in and took a look at like how people were behaving based on the limited set of properties that you can see from a validator, and people weren't. Maybe people are lazy, or they actually don't care, or maybe, and that.
I think people care a lot. I think this gets to the crux of like what I think is our business, which is this is a business of trust. It's not a couple metrics that are out there. It's, you know, when I choose to have someone run hardware for me to support the network, I choose that person carefully. And from Stake's perspective, we don't chase down on price. We provide a premium service and we charge accordingly. And I think the reality is there are a lot of people who want someone who's able to constantly invest in our security, our hardware, and our people versus chasing downwards on price. And I think, you know, there are enough competitive people in the category that we've seen that people are choosing those better services over time.
So, yeah, I do appreciate that. Have you seen many validators communicate like the direction they've been voting, what they've been voting for, and why they've been voting?
I think governance is massively under-communicated, and that there are a ton of people who are not as active in the protocols as I bet Evan would hope in terms of actually having an active governance set.
Yeah, and I'd love to get your input on it from a layer one network level, right? You have to cultivate your validators when you get started, and then you want to see them do certain things. But what ends up happening is you have a lot of validator service providers that are running like 30 different networks and very limited number of protocol specialists that are able to engage with those. So
I'll say that a lot of the top validators on Mina are people that have been in the community a long time and have been building tools for the community. They kind of have a brand recognition within Mina because they've been contributing so long to the protocol. And those people are both, I think, doing a good job representing themselves in the protocol and also participating like in informal off-chain governance to help try to move things along in a positive direction. So somehow things are filtering out towards that.
yeah, is there like from a layer one network level, like, is there like an ideal set of like criteria that you want validators to behave with, or how active, or like, you know, attending all the calls or whatnot? Because right, there definitely is like a spectrum of validators, as you had mentioned, right? Mina is very easy and quick to manage versus like a Solana validator that might be a little bit more difficult than Mina. So
I think that a lot of this is very dependent on the protocol, actually. So for Mina, like, we really want to have a lot of hobbyists that are like more like ICs that are contributing to the protocol. I think in general, when we think what is like kind of like the optimal staking participant on a network, I go towards thinking about who are people that are representing the values of the network, who are people that are really staying engaged in the protocol in a way where they can have kind of deep, meaningful discussion and input into what we're doing. I think it's just kind of showing up as a lot of it, and then also just being there to engage with everybody else. That makes a big difference.
yeah, that would be ideal, right? But it's also everyone's attention is very limited, and a lot of the main participants that are on Mina also have like some of those same obligations that they have with other networks. And right, maybe there was a narrative at one point in time where it was like one chain is going to rule them all, but now we're fully in like an interchain sort of world. So do you see like, I'd love your opinion on this also, like, do you see like what is potential solutions to get validators or even like their protocol specialists, like me being one, from like stop treading water to like trying to keep up with everything to a maybe like an optimal state where we can breathe and we can also be very beneficial to like how the networks are run.
I'll take it first and then let you go. I think we made a mistake, or the early proof of stake protocols made a mistake when they combined governance as a validator and the ability to get slashed as a validator. And so I think when people think about those two things, when they think about where to delegate their stake, I think most people's primary concern is my validator going to securely and reliably make sure I get my rewards and I don't get slashed? And that kind of it's like reason 1, 2, and 3 to choose a validator. And then right after that, way down on the list, unfortunately, is how do they perform in governance? And so I think separating those two might be the answer to things like that, or eliminating slashing in some cases.
I like that solution and agree. Mina doesn't have slashing on its network, so I think that's made a big difference towards how people think about validating on Mina. I don't have to worry about the slashing thing in particular. I can just look at uptime. I can look at engagement. Yeah.
Go ahead, Mohak.
Yeah, from my perspective, I mean, what I felt while kind of engaging with network at the early stage as a validator was that, first of all, as Hwang said, that on Mina, running a node is easy. So you can have large number of validators, but that does not solve the decentralization problem, because still people are going to stake with the top validator out there. The barrier to entry becomes so high. Mina has done it really well by giving Prism grants or supporting a long list of validators. But what I always felt was that if a validator was early into any protocol, then you are able to get all these foundation delegations, treasury delegations, or these things if you're not a professional validator to be able to work with institutions. Otherwise, what usually happens is that the top validators get a lot of stake from the institutions, and then they're at the top spot. So the whole retail crowd also stake to those validators. So eventually, the smaller validators don't have any incentives to run nodes on the network.
Yeah, Evan, what is your opinion on professional validator service providers like us and the smaller, I guess, retail or independent validators?
You can be honest.
I think they serve very different roles than the ecosystem. I think that professional validators bring a lot in terms of experience and other tools, but if it only ends up being professional validators, it's going to be really bad for the centralization of each protocol and for the space. So we need to be very careful about, I think layer ones in general and communities need to be careful about making sure they're cultivating an environment by which it makes sense to be a individual staking person. And I would imagine you would probably all want the same, because there's I think in that community of many different people, that's where it'll probably see real kind of vibrancy or decentralization.
Yeah, there's actually, and again, Evan, I want to ask you this and probably get everyone's opinion, but so when there needs to be stuff done at the network level, right? You need to have these in-depth, let's say, governance discussions on protocol or network level changes. There needs to be, as you said, an active and vibrant kind of communication forum and so you probably have a discourse forum, a Discord. Some people might have a Telegram chat, Slack Connect, or what have you. And then you get into situations where sometimes let's say, for example, Mina, your network goes down, or it's halted for some reason, and then you need to immediately reach all of us, right? Your independent validators and as well as professional validators. It's easy to ping us because there are only a handful of us, but what ends up happening is we get messages across every single panic messages across every single communication channel because we need to do something immediately. And what ends up happening is we revert to this sort of centralized and closed off and non-transparent way of communicating, where validators, the infrastructure service providers that are running the network, are communicating with the foundation and the rest of the people, the world, in a supposed transparent, decentralized system. it's not happening like that, right? I mean, like, there's like an ideal, right? But then, like, theoretically, but practically, sometimes we end up reverting to less than ideal solutions, right? So
yeah, I think at those times things do end up happening in Discord groups with like just like all the people that like are kind of known to be the people that are validating and participating on these networks and have the ability to do upgrades and move the network in directions when it needs to. And I would agree. I think that is we're sort of at this moment kind of like blessed by the informality of things where can figure things out as a collective, but at the same time, that's not a sustainable position, I think, to be in. And I know for the Mina community in particular, like, it's something that I definitely want to help see if we can figure out, like, is what are really good processes in moments like that where we can have transparency, or we can work together, or we can make decisions collectively, even in moments of like, like urgent upgrade kind of deals. Yeah.
it's like, do we have like an action plan for situations for as a professional validator or service provider, like what would you want to see from like layer one networks in terms of how things should be done, keeping in like decentralization, right? Like there's like a tug of war, right? But
yeah, so this is a big problem for us. We support 40 different chains, and at any given time, you can have the red phone going off from any of these guys. We built tech so that it all funnels into one centralized kind of messaging service that then pings our operations team. That's obviously not realistic if you're just running one node or nodes on a couple protocols. But I think having one bat phone, if you will, that people can sign up for is important. The problem and the thing that makes this very hard is, go back a couple weeks ago, Ethereum had a critical security upgrade that they did not want exposed, and they wanted enough of the network to have upgraded prior to releasing this into the wild. And so they resorted to what's effectively private communications. I don't know how you think about these things, but it's like there are 15 people who can get 66% of the upgrade, or there's 100 people that can get it there. You probably need that short list so that you can get to them.
We've been through similar things, and it's really hard. I mean, I think having that action plan is something that goes a long way. And I think in particular what we're realizing is having an action plan that everyone is kind of like pre-consensus on, so that everyone knows like what the steps are when these sorts of things happen, is probably like the place to go. And one thing I wonder with this is maybe even in situations like that, there is an opportunity to have more transparency, kind of similar to other open source projects where they disclose, hey, like there's a bug with threat level orange or whatever that means for them, but they don't disclose exactly what it is until a certain amount of time has passed. I wonder if something like that will end up being relevant to crypto.
yeah, we have about 5 minutes left, but yeah, I would love to get your input, Mohak, on sort of the decentralization and centralization vectors that liquid staking does provide, right? I think liquid staking gives a lot of freedom to delegators for how they kind of vote with their feet, but also, right, if you have enormously large staking pools that give you liquid staking, that is also, again, a centralization vector too. But yeah, I'd be interested in your opinion on that.
Sure. I mean, so the best part about liquid staking is it brings so much opportunity to bring decentralization at one more level. So when I kind of started the discussions last year with, the investors around liquid staking, there's not much awareness about liquid staking. And then even with the chains, we got so much pushback from some of the chains who said that we don't want a derivative layer of our token to be built. But then my answer to that at that time was that this is happening. It doesn't matter if you want it or not. We don't want your permission to do it. We will do it. So the best possible mechanism you can do, or the route you should take, is to work with us closely to be able to build it in the best possible manner. And as, for example, like when we receive a lot of these delegations, or when we will receive a lot of these delegations, So we have opportunity to choose mix of professional validators as well as the smaller validators that, let's say, have built a reputation in that particular chain's community. So the chain is doing or will be doing the efforts from their levels, and we can do it from our level. But you're right, once we have enormous stake, then there is a lot of governance power that we hold, which we do not want to hold. And I'm actually just kind of waiting to see how the whole market emerges. There have been a lot of discussions going around where there's possibility that people will start selling their governance power, where they're keeping rewards, just selling the governance power. That's one, which the route we don't want to take. But second is that giving the governance rights to the derivative token holders itself, so that we don't control the sway in any chain.
Awesome. Yeah, Tim, you had mentioned that your opinion on running the infrastructure at a layer one, and then also separating that from like the governance side of things. I know that there are now, because of these issues, a lot of different entities that are kind of budding up, like StableNode, for example. The former MakerDAO guy, some of the former MakerDAO guys have a lot of great governance experience, and that's basically what they've been trying to do. How do you, and I guess to end it off, like how, if we can each go and talk about like how you see maybe some solutions in decentralization at the validator level looking like, potentials maybe, or what you would like to see.
Well, so I would just like to see validation and governance have separate voting effectively. And so you can delegate to a validator who runs your infrastructure. You can delegate to somebody else who knows a lot about governance and can actually vote on your behalf in the protocol. That's what I'd love to see across every chain.
Yeah, let's see. I think for one on the Mina side is just continuing to make it easier and easier on the technical side to run a node. I think that is one direction here, but I think there's kind of a core incentive problem also. That I wonder if something like quadratic voting with identity might solve in the really long run. But in like the middle run, I also kind of agree that like better processes around governance and separating that from like validation at a protocol level probably at least help in the near term.
Mohak?
Yeah, for me, like our aim is to kind of find ways to remove as many centralization actors as possible. And I'm hoping to see how shared secret validators, SSV, kind of evolves, because then we don't have to decide which validator to stake. The whole SSV mechanism kind of brings another middle layer to remove that level of centralization factor. So I'm really kind of excited to see how that emerges.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.